Most people imagine the first transistor as a primitive version of the transistors we use today. Maybe 3 neat layers of semiconductor, P-type, N-type, P-type. But the first working transistor looked nothing like that. It was essentially a piece of germanium with 2 tiny gold contacts pressed against its surface. And somehow, this strange-looking device could amplify an electrical signal. So, how? How can 2 metal points touching the same piece of semiconductor allow a small electrical signal to control a much larger one? And there is another strange detail. Those 2 gold contacts were placed incredibly close together, only about 40 micrometers apart. Why did they need to be so close? To answer both questions, let's rebuild the first transistor, piece by piece. First, we need something to hold the device together. So we'll start with this plastic support. On the support sits a metal plate. This will eventually provide an electrical connection to the bottom of the semiconductor. On top of the metal plate, we place a small block of germanium. Germanium is a semiconductor, and importantly, this germanium is N-type. That means that inside the bulk of the germanium, the main mobile charge carriers are electrons. We've explained N-type and P-type semiconductors in a previous video, so check that out if you want a deeper explanation. The metal underneath makes electrical contact with this germanium block. This becomes the base, one of our 3 transistor terminals. Now comes the unusual part. A small insulating plastic wedge is placed above the germanium. A very thin piece of gold foil is wrapped around the pointed end of this wedge. At first, the gold is one continuous piece, but we need 2 separate electrical contacts. So Walter Brattain, one of the inventors of the transistor, used a razor blade to cut directly through the gold foil at the tip. That cut separates the gold into 2 electrically isolated contacts. And because the cut is extremely narrow, the 2 contacts end up only around 40 micrometers apart. That's about 0.04 of a millimeter. Remember that distance, because it turns out to be one of the most important details in the entire device. The plastic wedge is then pushed downward until both gold contacts touch the surface of the germanium. And these are not large metal contacts. Each one touches the germanium over a very small region. Essentially, a point. And that is where the name point-contact transistor comes from. A spring applies pressure from above. Its job is simply to keep those 2 tiny gold contacts pressed firmly against the germanium. Finally, electrical connections are attached. This side is the emitter. This side is the collector. And the metal contact underneath the germanium is the base. We now have a 3-terminal device. That is the physical construction of the first transistor. But we still haven't answered the important question. How does this amplify anything? At first, it seems like it shouldn't. Remember, the germanium is N-type. So throughout most of the material, electrons are the majority carriers. But if electrons dominate the germanium, why are the 2 contacts on the surface so important? Because the surface is not quite the same as the material deeper inside. Right at the surface, the crystal structure ends. And because of surface states and the electric field they produce inside the semiconductor, the concentration of charge carriers near the surface can become very different from the concentration deeper in the germanium. Electrons can be depleted from a very thin region near the surface, and holes can become the dominant carriers there. A hole is a missing electron state that behaves like a movable positive charge. So now we have something slightly strange. The bulk of the germanium is N-type, but a very thin region near the surface can behave more like P-type material. The germanium hasn't been chemically redoped. Instead,
the electrical conditions at the surface produce what is called a surface inversion layer. And this is crucial to understanding why this strange transistor could work.
Now let's connect the power supplies. We'll use the base as our reference voltage, 0 volts. The emitter is made positive relative to the base, and the collector is made negative relative to the base. For the moment, forget about the collector. Let's look only at the emitter. What happens when we make this contact positive? Current begins to flow through the emitter contact, and the emitter introduces additional holes into the region near the germanium surface. When we say that holes are injected, remember that we're not talking about tiny physical particles being fired into the germanium. A hole is the absence of an electron. As neighboring electrons move between available states, that vacancy effectively moves through the material as a positive charge carrier. So if the emitter current increases, the number of holes near the emitter increases.
But those holes don't simply stay directly underneath the emitter. They spread away from it through the germanium near the surface, and some can travel through the material below it. And now we return to that strange detail from earlier. The collector is only about 40 micrometers away. Why does that matter? Because the holes introduced near the emitter don't have very far to travel before they reach the region influenced by the collector. The collector is negative relative to the base, and holes behave as positive charge carriers. So the electric field associated with the collector pulls these carriers toward the collector region.
That means holes introduced near the emitter can travel across the tiny gap between the contacts and influence the current flowing through the collector. And now we finally get the key transistor effect. Change the current through the emitter, and you change the current through the collector. Suppose the emitter current increases slightly. More holes are introduced. More of those carriers move through the germanium toward the collector region, and the collector current changes. Reduce the emitter current, and the collector response changes again. So a small electrical signal applied at the emitter can control a larger electrical response in the collector circuit. That is the basic idea of amplification. But there is still one part of our original mystery left. Why exactly did those two gold contacts need to be so close together? Imagine moving the collector farther and farther away from the emitter. The injected carriers would now have to travel a much greater distance through the germanium, and along the way, many of them could disappear through recombination before ever reaching the collector region. The collector would become much less sensitive to what was happening at the emitter. But place the two contacts only tens of micrometers apart, and suddenly, a significant number of the carriers introduced near the emitter can affect what happens at the collector. For the first time, amplification had been achieved using a solid semiconductor device rather than a vacuum tube. But the same strange construction that made the point-contact transistor work also gave it a major weakness. Its operation depended heavily on what was happening at the surface of the germanium. That made the point-contact transistor both ingenious and problematic. Its behavior depended on two microscopic metal contacts. The pressure of the contacts mattered, their spacing mattered. Even small changes could affect how well the transistor worked. Those tiny contacts were mechanically delicate. They were difficult to manufacture consistently. So the obvious next question was, could you build a transistor that produced the same effect without relying on two microscopic pieces of metal pressing against a surface? William Shockley soon developed a much cleaner approach. Instead of depending on metal point contacts and surface effects, the semiconductor itself could be manufactured with alternating p-type and n-type regions, the junction transistor. And that device would develop into the bipolar junction transistor, or BJT. So the first transistor was not a crude version of the neat three-layer device we recognize today. It worked in a very different way. Yet from this remarkably simple-looking experiment came the first working transistor and the beginning of modern semiconductor electronics.